radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
Well. Good evening, Fade to Black. How you doing? I got everything in order here. Today's Wednesday, September 24th, 2025. It is the Rapture. Yeah. Well, it was supposed to be yesterday. It was supposed to be yesterday and today. All right. So I guess we got to wait till midnight or something. Local time. Whatever that may be. I laugh now, wake up tomorrow and I'm the only one on my block. Where'd everybody go? What? It's real? Oh my. How you doing? All right. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Let's do this, man. Fade to Black. I want to let everybody know that it's a little off this week. Today is my Friday because it's the Rapture. And I've decided to take tomorrow off because I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. Not really. I know. Am I being insensitive to those out there that have sold everything? What are my kids going to do without me? What? You don't expect your kids to go with you? So I don't want to be insensitive. I really don't. Where was I going with that? Oh, today is my Friday. Tomorrow I'm on the road and I will be in San Diego hosting the conference this weekend. It's going to be a lot of fun. Can't wait to do it and get down there and hang out with everybody. All right, because my wife is going to be there. That's right, Sarah Breskman Cosme. Yeah, we get to, bump into each other like ships in the night at conferences once in a while somewhere around the world. But that's going on this weekend. This weekend, Fade to Black, Monday night, we had Travis Walton and Jennifer Stein here. The 50th anniversary for Travis. Absolutely incredible. And then last night, Tony Rathman, Staticom Revealed. What an amazing show last night. Tony is absolutely incredible. And then we're going to wrap up this week tonight with Dean Bertram. I've been talking about this all week. We're going to be talking about the Shaver mystery tonight. Tomorrow we are off air. I have mentioned every night on the show that the Shaver mystery is ufology 101. It's part of it. And when you begin, I'll talk about this with Dean in just a minute, but when you start this thing and you're buying books and, and you got videos and you're watching documentaries, eventually as you travel down that road, you end up at the Shaver mystery. All right. You just do. And there's so much that stems off of it in every direction. And tonight we're going to go through all of that. It's going to be a great show. And for those of you out there that are newer to the subject, the conspiracy subject, and you're going to hear about maybe the Shaver mystery tonight for the first time, you're going to have some fun over the next month or so. Right? I'm telling you what, kids. The Shaver mystery. That's what we are going to do tonight. I mentioned Long John Nebel a lot on the show. And Nebel, before myself, before George Norrie, before Art Bell, there was Long John Nebel. And Long John Nebel ran on the air from the 50s, 60s, and into the early 70s on WOR out of New York City, and he was pulling 25 to 50 million listeners a night. His show ran for 6 hours. It was called The Party Line, and he covered all of this stuff: ghosts, the paranormal, UFOs, and just time travel. He covered everything. But one of the things that he covered on the show extensively was the shaver mystery. And throughout the 50s and 60s, I mean, it was a constant subject on his show. And I listened to all of them, man. It absolutely great. So if you get a chance in your shaver mystery rabbit hole over the next couple of months, look up Long John Nebel. All of his stuff is archived on the Internet Archive, and you can go and listen to those shaver mystery shows yourself. All right. I have 6 events coming up. There may be a 7th and an 8th added over the next week, but first up is the Conscious Life Expo, February 20th through the 23rd, 2026 at the LAX Hilton. After that is the Contact Modalities Expo, May 1st through the 3rd, 2026 in Delavan, Wisconsin at the Delavan Lake Resort. After that, Contact in the Desert, May 28th through June 1st, 2026. Tickets on sale this Thanksgiving Day. I come back from that, head south to Peru for the Inca Celebration of the Sun with Brian Forrester. And that is June 23rd through July 1st. And then after that, it's Monty Python and the Tour of Scotland. And that is August 1st through the 9th, 2026. I come back from that, head back to South America, to Peru and Easter Island, also with Brian Forster. I get to go see them heads, man. Some Moai action. And that is November of 2026. All right, kids, you got it? Tonight, Dean Bertram is here. We're talking tonight about the shaver mystery. And what is the shaver mystery? Who was Ray Palmer, right? This is all big, huge stuff. And when we look at Ray Palmer and his involvement with, say, Maury Island, and you can't get away with anything without mentioning Fate magazine, and everything around Ray and how many pies he had his fingers in. It's a crazy story. And Dean Bertram, he's a PhD. He's a historian, a filmmaker, and host of the Talking Weird on Untold Radio Network. He directs the Midwest WeirdFest. That's right. A Night of Horror International Film Festival, and his award-winning short, The Shaver Mystery, is currently on the festival circuit. I would like to welcome for the first time, he's right here, to Fade to Black, Dean Bertram. Dean,
oh my God.
how are you doing?
Good. I'm about to fanboy out to be on your show, Jimmy, to be honest with you.
I love that. You know what? Yeah. Okay. You got points out of the gate, Dean.
Three really quick things, though.
Sure.
Firstly, I'm so glad to be with you for your Friday. Who wouldn't want to be with you on your Friday, the best day of the week? Secondly, I would love to be going on that trip with you to go to Easter Island and everything else. I've seen your ads. How cool!
Big deal, man. That's a big deal. Okay, and you said there was 3.
Thirdly, Long John Nebel is why I started to make the films I'm making. I was very aware of Ray Palmer and Richard Shaver. I had written in my PhD dissertation on UFO belief about them. I'd agreed with people like John Keel, who'd suggested that they were kind of, as you said, and it's so good to talk to somebody who understands the importance of the Shaver mystery, that Ray Palmer was really the person who invented flying saucers. But when I was doing an episode of my old show, Mysterious Library, which was also on the Untold Radio Network with my good friend Jason McLean, and I suggested, hey, let's do the Shaver mystery. It'll be fun. One of the things I did was listen. I'd never listened to it before. The Long John Nebel show, where Nebel interviews Ray Palmer and Richard Shaver. And I'm listening to it. And during that episode, Long John Nebel says, well, joining me from Amherst, Wisconsin is Ray Palmer. And I live in Wisconsin now. Nothing to do with Palmer originally. And I'm like, how far can Amherst be from where I live? Plug it into the Google. It's like 40-something minutes away. And I'm like, what on earth? So it was a great intro.
That's you can't ignore the universe, Dean. You can't when it reaches out to you like that. And you got to love it when it happens that way. A lot of people don't pay attention to stuff like that. So how long did it take to get in your car?
Like the next day.
Yeah, of course. Long John Nebel. It's my job. This is my job. And so whatever you do, it doesn't matter what you do for your gig, but if you're into your gig, then you know the history of your gig and you know the people in whatever it is. If you're a tire changer on a pit crew in NASCAR, you know the baddest ass tire changers in the history of NASCAR. That's just what you do. You know the best pit crews. And Long John Nebel, I study the art of talk radio. I have since I was a kid. And Long John Nebel changed me. And if he did one thing for me, he just let me know you need to be yourself. Long John never hid who he was or what interested him and brought him into this subject. And people resonated with him by the millions because they knew he wasn't wearing a mask. He was just the guy that they thought he was, and that's if you got to take away from Long John, and he stuck it out, man. He stuck it out. He stuck it out for a long time and learned so much on the show. And the show was hilarious at points too, as well. Funny show. I remember, and then we'll move on. We got to get straight to Shaver because this is just incredible. But I remember Long John, he has this guest on. I can't remember his name. And this is going to sound made up. He brings on a restaurant owner of an Italian restaurant. Did you listen? Did you hear that particular show? No,
I'd love to hear it though. Tell me about it.
About their haunted house that they lived in. And then he brought on a medium. I think he brought on somebody else. He would have 5, 6, 7 guests on. It was called the Party Line. And so some shows he would have 4 or 5 people sitting around at microphones, just sitting talking. And it was just absolutely incredible. But that show with the Italian restaurant owner, oh man, it was just classic, man. It was just rolling. I just love Long John Nebel. And also the Shaver mystery. This is another thing, not only about Long John, but when I was going down the rabbit hole of the Shaver mystery, just gobbling up everything that I could, I found out that the city of Los Angeles, do you know this? Do you know the story about LA and its forming and building? Do you know where I'm going with this?
I'd love to hear it.
Okay. Are you ready? And you can look this up and you can see this for yourself. LA was built on a series of caves to the underworld. And I'm talking about at the turn of the century, 1900, as the land surveyors came in and mapped LA, they also mapped these tunnels to the underworld with the people that lived there. And it's and I live in Los Angeles, man. I hadn't heard that story. And then I went down that rabbit hole because of the Shaver mystery. And it just led me there. It's something that you should look up after the show with what you do. It's a weird, it's just check it out. It's absolutely amazing, man. It's absolutely amazing. And so let's do this. I know that I've talked much about this, mentioning over and over again. If you haven't heard about the Shaver mystery, well, after this show, you're gonna go into this very fun research. So let's actually start there with the foundation. What is the Shaver mystery?
Okay, I'll tell you. I'll stack up the front though for people who really dig it after listening to this. The best book you can read as an overview is a book by Richard Toronto, who's one of the producers of my upcoming feature film, The Man Who Invented Flying Saucers. And he wrote a book called War Over Lemuria. And it's a wonderful overview of Palmer, Shaver, the Shaver mystery, and everything else. So if you want a quick coverage of the whole story, I get a copy of War Over Lemuria. The Shaver mystery, there's so many places where you can start it. I think the obvious place for me to start it, though, is in December of 1943. Raymond A. Palmer is the editor of a magazine called Amazing Stories, which was America's first science fiction pulp magazine. In fact, it's the magazine that we get the term science fiction from. The original founder of the magazine, Hugo Gernsback, had coined the term science-fiction, and it got shortened to science fiction. Anyway, Palmer had driven this magazine to incredible heights. It was failing when it was bought by the publishers who published it after Gernsback had published it, a company called Ziff Davis. And he had gotten it up to about 135,000, which was a great circulation for a magazine at the time. He'd done all the right things. He'd understood his demographic, made the stories more exciting. But a letter came into his offices in Chicago, a letter from an unknown, at that stage, writer called Richard Shaver. And Richard Shaver wrote this letter suggesting that he had discovered, well, not suggesting, saying that he had discovered an ancient language, an ancient alphabet, which was really essentially the English alphabet. But in Shaver's language, which he called Man-Tong, which is a shortening probably of Man-Tongue, the original pre-diluvial, pre-sinking of Atlantis language, according to Richard Shaver, was that every letter in the English alphabet had a secret meaning, or a meaning which let you decode words in the English language and in other languages. So A, for example, meant animal, B meant B as in to be, C meant C as in I see you, D meant detrimental, E meant energy, etc., etc. So he suggested that you could understand words by breaking them down into their letter value, and then they would give you the original meaning of the word. Now, the person who opened the letter was an associate editor of Amazing Stories, a man called Harold Brown. And when Brown was reading this letter in the office and describing all the things which Shaver was suggesting, he just laughed and he crumpled it up and said, well, here's a letter from another crackpot, and threw it in the trash can. But Raymond Palmer in his side office heard Brown's kind of overview, and he came out of his office, he snatched up the letter and he said, and you call yourself an editor? And he flattened it out on the table and he said, you're going to run this whole thing in the next issue. And Brown said to Palmer, listen, I respect your opinion. You know, you're obviously a senior editor. What do you see in this madness? And Palmer said something to the words of, I'll tell you one day, or one day you'll find out. Anyway, they ran it in the January 1944 issue of Amazing Stories. And they had this incredible feedback from readers. Some people saying, well, it's crazy. Other people testing it out and saying, Shaver is onto something. So Raymond Palmer knew when he was onto a good thing, and to get a bunch of letters, it made him realize, well, this is interesting. So he contacted Richard Shaver. He wrote back to him and said, have you got anything else? And Richard Shaver, lo and behold, did have something else. A 10,000-word essay, essentially, called A Warning to Future Man. And in this essay, Richard Shaver described a pre-diluvial, again before the flood, civilization of these entities called the Atlans and the Titans. And they were incredibly sophisticated in all kinds of things, in art and technology and everything else. They were a spacefaring civilization. And they realized that the planet Earth was being poisoned by the rays of our sun. So they built this extensive cavern world to escape the poisons. But even down there, they realized that the poisons were harming them. So they fled the planet. They went off into interstellar space to escape the poisons of our world's sun. But they left behind a number of people, which Shaver called collectively the abandoned Darrow. And to break it down into the three groups, there were the Darrow, and D, remember, in Shaver's language meant D stood for detrimental, Rho stood for robot. So they were detrimental robots. And what Shaver meant by that wasn't that they were mechanical robots, but that they were driven, the robot was driven by one idea, and in his language would indicate it was by being detrimental. So all the Darrow wanted to do was rape and pillage and hurt people. They're also the Tarot. In Shaver's language, the T was like the Christian cross. It meant something positive. So they were integrative. They were the good guys who lived in the cavern world. And up above were essentially us, what became mankind. Palmer realized that he couldn't run this kind of essay in his magazine, so he recrafted it into a science fiction story called I Remember Lemuria, which he built up for over a year. So the original letter, the Man-Tong alphabet letter, ran in the January 1944 issue. Palmer ran finally I Remember Lemuria, his version of Shaver's Warning to Future Man, in the March of 1945 issue, and he branded it as a racial memory story, which was a cool term at the time, this idea that somehow, this Jungian idea that we could, connect with the collective unconscious and we all could remember things. And this story that he did, he just basically turned it into a cool science fiction story about this ancient clash on planet Earth between these good creatures and these bad creatures and the Atlans and the Titans going into space. It went gangbusters. It went from the 135,000 he'd already got it to 185,000, which was unthinkable in the science fiction pulp world then, that kind of circulation figure. And then Palmer knew, I'm definitely onto a good thing, and he continued to run Shaver stories by Richard Shaver, which were based on his own experiences. Now, and I'll throw it back to you. The quick twist is that Shaver didn't say it was racial memory. In fact, in the second story, which was published in Amazing Stories, called Thought Records of Lemuria, the follow-up to I Remember Lemuria, Palmer let Shaver write an introductory kind of letter to that saying, it's not racial memory. I know this stuff because I have been in the caverns where the Darrow and the Terror still are. I have accessed the Thought Records of Lemuria. And so what Palmer began to do with Amazing Stories, which had never been done in science fiction before, was to say, the stories I am running, and Shaver became the dominant force in Amazing Stories for the next 2 to 3 years. This isn't science fiction. This is based on a real conflict going on in the distant past and still beneath our feet with humankind today. And the Darrow are responsible for most of our misfortunes. They're hitting us with rays that are making us crash our cars. They're just beaming messages into our head to make us hate people. They're kidnapping people from the surface of the planet to either eat or to do terrible experiments on or to use as essentially their slaves. And this became a scandal in science fiction. And I'll throw it back to you.
It sounds like 2025 to me. Sounds like 2025. Nobody's shocked by any of this today. But here's the thing with all of that. It says to me so many different things about people and the thirst for knowledge and interesting things that we are interested in our past. That right there, or the unseen and the mysteries of about us. That is always going to be there for all of it. We don't have any answers for any of that even today. So there's that part of it. Second, man, we love a good story. Don't screw the story up. Get to the end, right? You can have my imagination. Just don't screw it up. And there's that part too as well. And back then, and this is the third part, science and fiction. Two key words here. Science back then, everything was blowing up. Everything was blowing up. We think that think about what people went through between 1920 and 1945. 25 simple years from the year 2000 to now, right? You get stereo radio, you get television, you get the nuclear bomb, you've got jet airplanes, you've got rockets, you have cars, you have highway systems being built, anything that you can imagine, telephones, anything that, you know what I mean? Anything that you can imagine was invented if you just imagined it. So people had a huge interest in all of this. You combine all of that into Shaver's work, man, that's a home run, isn't it?
And it was a home run. In fact, at the height of Amazing Stories, the height of the Shaver run, Palmer got the circulation up to 250,000. It was unthinkable. And this is actual sales of, now I've advertised in magazines, as you probably have as well. When you advertise in a magazine, they say, well, we've got a circulation of whatever, but the readership is actually probably 4 or 5 times that because it's in doctors' offices and families are reading and everything else. So there were probably millions of Americans who were cognizant of what the Shaver mystery was, not to mention that it got covered in mainstream magazines like Life and in Harper's. This was a cultural phenomenon at the dawn of the UFO era. Don't forget, as you well know, but this is for the audience because I know you know this inside and out, that it is June of 1947 where the UFO phenomenon, the modern flying saucer phenomenon, explodes in the news wires of the day after Kenneth Arnold's sighting above Mount Rainier. On the newsstands of America, when Arnold had his sighting, was the June 1947 issue of Amazing Stories, which was the all-shaver issue. Now, some people would say for the last 2 years it was already the all-shaver magazine, Amazing Stories, because the shaver mystery was front and center, the most important thing it ran. But this issue was nothing but the shaver mystery, the June 1947 issue. All that it had in the pages of that was stories by Richard Shaver, articles by people who were kind of complimenting the Shaver mystery, including an article called Visitors from the Void by Vincent Gaddis, who was one of the great Forteans of that period and wrote regularly for Ray Palmer in Amazing Stories. And Vincent Gaddis's piece in the June 1947 issue was essentially about flying saucers before that term had been popularized to mean extraterrestrial craft visiting the planets. So when Arnold has his sighting, the Amazing Stories issue has this piece that, well, it has the Shaver Mystery Special, but it has this piece by Vincent Gaddis talking about craft visiting this planet from elsewhere with historical examples. Amazing Stories, as John Keel said, the late great John Keel, who most of your listeners will probably know is the author of the Mothman Prophecies and many other important books. Keel recognized this after the fact, and he said Ray Palmer was the man who invented flying saucers. He'd laid all of this out. He'd had 2 to 3 years of the Shaver mystery. He had covers with flying saucers on it before flying saucers appeared in American skies. He had articles by people like Vincent Gaddis. He was talking about Charles Fort's theories about people from elsewhere visiting us and owning this planet and capturing us. And the Shaver mystery didn't just have the Darrow and the Terror beneath this planet. They had extraterrestrials visiting us and combating the people beneath the planet. And the Shaver mystery had set all of this up. Again, millions of Americans were conscious of this.
Yeah. And okay. So I'm going to make, I want you to comment on 2 points I want to make. The folklore, the mythology behind Ray is supported by biblical stories and the Anunnaki and the Watchers and all of that. If you look at the similarities between them, these stories have been told and retold, for generations. That's the first thing. So the story is easy for people to digest because they probably heard it before, another version of it, and it's just repeating to themselves. So I want your reaction to that because you're the PhD. But the second thing, Ray Palmer and people, when if you do a deep dive into ufology and you really follow what is connected, what happened with Maury Island and Kenneth Arnold's involvement with that, and who picked up the phone and called Kenneth and told him to get on the story, was Ray Palmer and Fate magazine. And that's, it's just like incestuous, weird things. And everybody, not everybody, but 2 or 3 people that were involved with Maury Island in the very beginning were agents, secret agents, federal agents that went through every big UFO moment and historical conspiracy from Maury Island all the way to the Kennedy assassination and beyond. Same names. It's Ray Palmer, man, driving the car. It's like it's crazy, isn't it?
It's nuts. And there's so much to unpack there. So quickly, your first point about the idea of ancient civilizations, ancient aliens visiting us, the Anunnaki, all of these kind of ideas. You're right. Today, everybody, probably since the late 60s into the 70s, thanks to Eric von Däniken, and now thanks to shows like Ancient Aliens and everything in between, we've been so conditioned to re-examine ancient texts within the context of them perhaps pointing to extraterrestrial or advanced technological civilizations when we're looking at the Bible, or we're looking at, whatever, fill in the blank, whatever ancient text you want to look at with, beings with incredible powers who come from the heavens and everything else. But of course, when Ray Palmer and Richard Shaver were plugging this stuff in the mid-1940s, there was no Eric von Daniken yet. Eric von Daniken was still 25 years away. Ancient Aliens was still like 70 years away. Like, you know, there was a big, so this, much of what we think of today, which we're so conditioned to, is anybody vaguely interested in the field, or probably anybody at all who consumes any television, the idea of ancient astronauts or ancient aliens, probably, well, it had been talked about slightly before them. I mean, there's a long historical, you know, record of this, but it's really the Shaver mystery and Ray Palmer who drums this, again, millions of readers, right, into the collective unconscious before the UFO era begins. So they've set all of this up. And today we often people talk about it and start with Eric von Daniken, again, with Chariots and the Gods. And I think 68 or 69 was the German version. And then we got it in the West a year later, but it all literally goes back to Palmer and Shaver. And we can talk a little bit later about some of Shaver's own archaeological work. That's kind of a different story. But to get to your second point, which was Maury Island, which I think really hammers home the centrality of Raymond Palmer to the development of so much of what we believe in contemporary ufology. Because I often use the term X-Files UFO belief or X-Files ufology. And when I use that term as a kind of, not dismissive, but I just use it because I think people understand what that means. The idea of a government conspiracy, the idea of crash sources, the idea of a cover-up, the idea of, you know, abductions, all of these type of things that actually been laid by Palmer and Shaver earlier, and then by Palmer with the Maury Island incident. So what happens is, just a very quick overview, because you suggest let's talk about Maury Island. This will just take me a couple minutes, but
no, sure, go ahead.
But Kenneth Arnold, and I'm sure almost all of your listeners will realize this, but Kenneth Arnold sighting of 9 crescent-shaped craft flying near Mount Rainier in June of 1924, 1947 sparks what we consider the modern UFO era. So he's a private pilot. He's flying in that part of Washington state, and he sees these 9. They weren't flying saucers, ironically, and that's a very long story on how they became flying saucers through various press interpretations and everything else. But he saw 9 crescent-shaped craft moving at incredible speed near Mount Rainier. And he reported this when he landed, and all of a sudden it became a national news story, and it got shortened to that he saw flying saucers, and this became the modern concept of what, you know, extraterrestrial craft kind of look like, flying disc-shaped craft. Anyway, Arnold became a national figure because of this story. After that event, there was, of course, the Roswell event that a lot of people tend to trace now to the beginning of the UFO story. But what we forget today as modern people interested in ufology is from the 1947 press release by the U.S. Army Air Force Base in Roswell, New Mexico, that they crashed a down saucer and then they retracted it a day later, is that America forgot Roswell. Roswell literally isn't mentioned in the UFO material, the UFO literature, between 1947, when it dropped. It never got picked up by them then because there was no UFO literature until the late 1970s, early 1980s. In fact, I have the 2 major 1980 encyclopedias of the UFOs, one by Margaret Sachs and one by Ronald Story, on my bookshelf over there, and neither of them even mention Roswell.
Neither did, you know what? Neither did Long John Nebel.
It was forgotten.
Forgotten. And he had Kenneth Arnold on his show. He was a frequent guest on. The reason why I bring up Long John Nebel was for the longest time, for 2 solid decades, he covered every angle of every story with every possible guest that you can think of 6 nights a week. Right. And those guests, they covered in the 1950s, Nazi UFOs, a huge subject for his show. All of the big researchers, all of anybody, you know what I mean? Arthur C. Clarke was on his show.
Absolutely.
Right. And so they mentioned every case except Roswell.
Can you imagine you or Art Bell or George Norrie never mentioning Roswell? It would be unthinkable. That's
the solid point right there. That's the solid point.
But you know what is?
Go ahead.
No, do you know what is mentioned in all those early UFO books for the first few decades? The Maury Island incidents.
Yes, it
Okay. And now, what was the Maury Island incident? Because you asked, and I know you know, but I'll do a very quick overview of that. So, and this rewinds to the Shaver mystery very, very quickly. One of the parts of the Shaver mystery was Ray Palmer knew how to encourage letters from people to propel his story of the Shaver mystery, which was a wonderful publicity gimmick for Amazing Stories. Drove the magazine from 135.
A huge part of them was publishing letters.
Absolutely.
And getting debate going with the readers too, as well. A lot of fun. They had fun.
They were great letters. One individual, well, probably a number of individuals wrote twice, but one individual was an individual who you've referenced without saying his name, so you know who he is, and that was Fred Chrisman. Fred Chrisman wrote a couple of letters to Amazing Stories in the 1940s saying, and this is, remember, the Darrow were the terrible alien underground beings who were, interfering with the surface realm, saying that he was an Air Force pilot, an Army Air Force pilot in World War II, and that he'd been shot down in Burma or over Burma. And when he crashed on an island, he'd ended up in the cave system of the island and had essentially a battle with the Darrow. And I think they'd used a laser and they shot a hole through his arm or the hole through his buddy's arm. And he was begging Palmer, don't cover this story, it's dangerous. And he wrote another letter with similar tones to Palmer. Anyway, flash forward to post the Kenneth Arnold sighting on June 24, 1947. Fred Chrisman, who's already been in contact with Ray Palmer twice, sends him a letter accompanied with a bunch of slag saying that there has been this UFO incident where this saucer has dropped debris in the vicinity of Maury Island, which is off the west coast of America near Seattle and Tacoma, and this is something you should look into. Now, Ray Palmer, again, he can always smell a good story. Ray Palmer is in the process of launching Fate magazine at this time. He hasn't launched it yet, but that's a tale for maybe later in the show. But what does Ray Palmer do? Again, he knows this is a good story, and who does he think of the second there's a story about flying saucers? Kenneth Arnold, who's the country's major witness. Again, he knows how to put a story together. So Ray Palmer contacts Kenneth Arnold and says there's this story of a flying saucer incident above Maury Island. I know you live in the Pacific Northwest. I think he was based in Idaho or somewhere. Can you go and investigate this for me? And he offers, I think, Arnold, there's various versions. I've heard Palmer in recordings say $500. I've heard other people say $200, whatever.
I heard $200 in a hotel room. That's right.
That's one of them, and another one's $500 in a hotel room. But you're right. So
right.
For whatever reason, Arnold takes Arnold, and this story is a long, convoluted one, so I'll make it short. Arnold takes, and then I'll throw it back to you. Arnold takes Palmer up on the offer, and he pilots his private plane to Tacoma, Washington, on the west coast shores of Washington State, directly opposite Maury Island, and then the investigation begins. And I'll throw it back because otherwise I could talk about 15 minutes. So
here's the crazy part about this story. That part of the story after he lands his plane. After that, it's a complete issue of Mad Magazine Spy versus Spy.
It is.
Yeah. You've got bugged hotel rooms, tap lines, missing debris, replaced debris, people listening in, shadowy figures, the whole misleading stories, misdirections, dead drops, all it's like everything that you can imagine goes on there between Fred Chrisman and all the other individuals that are involved with this, including the crew of the fishing boat. But Fred Chrisman, as crazy as this is for me to say, not only is he legit, he's a real person and he's an agent. Fred Chrisman is in Oliver Stone's JFK movie. Did you know that?
You know what? I've seen the movie so many times. I forgot. He's actually appeared.
Fred Chrisman. I forget who plays him in the movie.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, he's Fred Chrisman was knee deep in it throughout American history, and you can just tie his name. You can put his, put the pins in the map and the dates and go, this guy was at the center of all the crazy. Fred Chrisman keeps popping up. And I'm talking about J. Edgar Hoover, secret seances, religious secret orders. It's long, but here we have Fred at the origins of everything up there in Tacoma. It was absolutely not Tacoma, Maury Island.
Well, Tacoma's on the mainland. You're right. So he was Tacoma based. That's absolutely
yeah. All of this is based in and around Tacoma and Seattle. Because there's an Army airfield there too as well. So anyway, so back where, okay, here's where Maury Island to me gets crazy town. A plane did crash. Killing the pilots that was carrying the debris, the slag, whatever it was, from the Maury Island incident. And that's the part where you go, okay, Fred, did you know that people were going to start dying in this story? Ray Palmer, did you know that, something like that? You go and you stir the hornet's nets like this, and now there's evidence and there's this and that, and they're going to get this stuff to Washington, D.C. as quick as they can. They're going to put this on a B-26 Mitchell and fly this stuff out of Tacoma, and the plane crashes and people die. That's the part where you back up and you go, man, maybe there's something more to this story than what we think. Is this Ray Palmer? Is this something else? Is this Fred Crimson letting it get away from him? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting that you asked, did they know? According to Ray Palmer, he did know. According to Ray Palmer, in a taped speech that I have, which appears in my upcoming feature documentary, Palmer actually warned Kenneth Arnold, do not let those Air Force agents get on that plane with that material, because I do not believe they will make it back to base. And it's significant that that's actually the first two fatalities, those two investigators who came to Maury Island. And again, just quickly, this is all because of Ray Palmer. We would have forgotten the Maury Island incident if it wasn't for him. He hires Kenneth Arnold to go there. Kenneth Arnold, when he gets in over his head, as you were mentioning, he's scared his room's being tapped. There's Men in Black activity. The first Men in Black activity in UFO lore, by the way. There's all this weirdness. What does Kenneth Arnold do? He calls the two investigating officers of his own case from the Air Force to come and help him. So they fly in, as you said, on a B-26. And after they interview Harold Dahl, the pilot of the boat which first saw the UFO debris crash thing, and Fred Chrisman, they don't apparently think a whole lot of it, but Fred Chrisman insists they take material back with them. And when Arnold was on the phone to Ray Palmer said, do not let those two agents fly back to their base. The reason the two Air Force officers, intelligence agents, were in a hurry to get back to their base was this was the day. It's such a weird story. This is when the U.S. Army and the U.S. Air Force split, because up until this day, it was the U.S. Army Air Force. And this was when the Air Force had just separated from the Army, and they were having U.S. Air Force Day, their great celebration. So the two officers who were investigating and thought, this is just a crazy story. We want to get back to base to celebrate this. So they flew back very quickly. So this is literally the first two U.S. Air Force fatalities in the history of the service, were the two men investigating Maury Island. So obviously from then in it spirals, because whatever the reality of the incident, when you lose two U.S. Air Force officers, they got the two other crew members to bail in parachutes. They continued operating the plane, and the plane went down near Kelso, Washington. They both died. And then the FBI get involved. So then the story spirals into something even bigger than Ray Palmer ever could have imagined when he first pointed Kenneth Arnold at this weird UFO kind of debris crash story, which he got in his he got in a letter from Fred Chrisman. And we can get into Fred Chrisman more as well if you want to.
Well, okay, so Fred Chrisman, check this out. Fred Chrisman and his involvement with Garrison's investigation, talking about JFK, Garrison's investigation is part of the extensive conspiracy theory that the film explores through the eyes of the district attorney. Chrisman is believed to be one of the inspirations for the enigmatic Mr. X, the high-level Pentagon official played by Donald Sutherland, who provides Garrison with detailed explanation of the conspiracy. Wow. Mr. X and others is Chrisman himself, who is portrayed in the film as a mysterious figure tied to the broader conspiracy narrative. Fred Chrisman, right? It's played by Donald Sutherland. Yeah, nuts, huh?
It is nuts. You know, there's a wonderful animator. I run a film festival called Midwest WeirdFest, as you mentioned in your introduction. And a few years ago, the film which won Best Animated Film was by Brian Shickley, and it's called something like In the Cave of the Space Nazis. And it's about Fred Chrisman fighting the Darrow. And he has this whole series with Fred Chrisman and Ray Palmer and Richard Shaver. So I would encourage anybody who's interested in seeing a comic view of what we're talking about, look into Brian Shickley's, I think it's In the Cave of the Space Nazis is the name of the.
And here's the other part, which I really enjoy about the way that you approach all of this, is that, and I mean this in the most warm, heartfelt way. Chariots of the Gods, for so many reasons, caught everybody's attention right at the right time. I cannot, and everybody that does this and does what I do, when I go to Egypt or I'm flying over the Nazca lines, I've got that film replaying in my head. It's very in the book. It's so influential.
It's amazing.
And yeah. And so when you look at these aspects of this, it's the greatest invention in human history. The greatest invention is the story, not made up or true. It doesn't matter. It's the ability to orate and to communicate with somebody else and express yourself so they can turn around and respond. That's the story, right? And it's the greatest thing. And so we get intrigued into the story, right? And as soon as your mind, it's in our DNA. It's the way our brain works. And Ray Palmer, very smart guy. The opposite side of the fence is somebody like Fred Chrisman. Both of these guys know how to tell a story and how to keep people's attention by telling that story, because you're just feeding what we crave, right? It's just human nature, isn't it? It's just our DNA from the dawn of man.
Yeah, I think that's a massive part of all of this. I think that we operate in a space where we like to think it's only delivering information. But if you're only delivering information, it's so incredibly boring. It's infotainment, really, the paranormal UFO space, because people want to hear the story. And I remember seeing Chariots of the Gods with my mom in a cinema. It might have been a repeat in Australia. And I think there was another documentary on psychic phenomenon. I was a little kid, but I was mesmerized the same way I was mesmerized by Leonard Nimoy's In Search Of, which in Australia was rebranded as Great Mysteries of the Universe or something. But those things knew how to tell a story. And if you just lay down the facts, then it doesn't become something which grabs you. And Ray Palmer was perhaps in this space, the first person who understood how to tell the paranormal, the ufological story as an incredible attention-grabbing thing. Because again, we're probably going to get to Fate magazine, but before Fate magazine, there was no newsstand magazine that dealt with the paranormal. Although, ironically, Ray Palmer's Amazing Stories had started to do that before Ziff Davis the publishers started to tighten down on Palmer's efforts. But Palmer understood that if you wanted to talk about the weird and the unusual and the Fortean or whatever we want to call it, you had to spin a good story. He probably was the first person who understood this in the kind of modernish, media landscape which we still exist in today. He would have loved the internet. Like Palmer would have lost his mind.
Oh, he would have ate it up. Well, and then and here's the other thing with us humans. It's called the truth. Right. And so you turn around and you go, well, yeah, it's a good story, but it's true. That's it.
Right.
You know, it absolutely seals the deal. I wanted to make a quick comment about this because we make discoveries all the time on this planet, and we have existing mysteries there too as well. But we weren't around for so much of it. And what I mean is this: we have history and we have prehistory. People don't understand necessarily what prehistory is. We have lots of evidence of prehistory and things, but prehistory is before writing, okay, before documentation. So so much as go to a museum and you want to see something that's 10,000 years old before history and go and look at it, it's absolutely crazy. The ladder that you climb, right? Okay, well, there are depictions of a ladder in Valencia in Spain on a cave wall. Holy crap. But my point is, with all of this, you hear about it, but then when you see it, you have confirmation, and that suddenly comes in. And so when Shaver is talking about these artifacts that he's found, and he's down there and he sees this and he sees, well, we have the other stuff that we can't explain too. And it just sounds so familiar to us. And that's what Shaver was doing when he was bringing up these and writing about these different artifacts and the things that he witnessed with technology, right?
Yeah, I think that the great potency of the Shaver mystery, and the great Joshua Cutchin, who's one of my favorite thinkers in the paranormal space today, makes this point in the film, both my short film, The Shaver Mystery, and in the feature, is that however you want to look at the Shaver mystery, whether you want to look at it as literally true, or whether you want to look at it as some science fiction hoax, as some people do, you can't ignore the fact that there's very powerful archetypal ideas there which resonate across our culture. The idea of earlier civilizations which were very technologically advanced, the idea of there being giants in prehistory, the idea of there being some type of world beneath our feet. These things exist in so many stories, whether it's biblical stories, whether it's fairy faith, whether it's legends from any part of the world you want to point at. These stories are very similar. So does that mean that they're real? Well, maybe, but it certainly means that they resonate so strongly with us, humankind as a species, whatever immediate culture that we come from, that they ring some bell which makes us all pay attention as soon as we hear them. And I think it's still true today. I think that's the reason that things like Ancient Aliens are as powerful as the Shaver mystery was, which were as powerful as Ignatius Donnelly's writings of Atlantis was in the 19th century, or as powerful as fairy faith was. Wherever we want to go, these things seem to us to be true. And whether that means true in a physical reality or in a spiritual reality or in a psychological reality, there's something there which I don't think we can escape as a species, which we can't look away from.
You can't. When you do something as dramatic as fly over the Nazca lines and look out the window,
I would love
all
to.
you can do is go, holy shit, it's all true. It's all true. There's nothing that is not true anymore, because it is giant beyond what you can imagine. I'm not talking about the glyphs. I'm talking about the Nazca plains. Those lines go from horizon to horizon. It's that big. You don't understand. And you're flying around and you see, and you just go, how can this be? This doesn't make any sense. There's nothing that can explain this that is going to be satisfactory. And which goes back to, when Shaver, where I wanted to ask you this, because I'll continue this thought, or you can continue my thought. Where were these tunnel entrances for Shaver?
That's a good question. I think that both Palmer and Shaver suggested there were entrances at the poles, which has since obviously become a popular point in Hollow Earth theory, which Palmer really also banged the drum of later in his Flying Saucers magazines and in Search and other of his publications. But to Shaver, they were everywhere, and you should be very careful if you entered them. But beneath most major cities, and you've heard the Long John Nebel show with Shaver and Palmer, there were stories which were being popularized in a Nebel's program that if you were in an elevator in a big city, in some buildings like in New York or Chicago, in big, cities in America, and if you pressed the buttons the right way, the elevator would go down to the subsurface world. And Shaver always suggested that most major cities, because he thought they were more crime-ridden and he thought they were noisier and more dangerous, and they bothered him personally, for whatever psychological reason, that there were Darrow colonies beneath these cities. And so basically everywhere, there were entrances, according to Shaver, all over the planet. And there were popular versions as well, of course. The suggestion of Mount Shasta came up, which people think there are underground elements of. Mammoth Cave and the cave systems in Kentucky, people thought there were major entrances in. And Shaver himself, when he moved to my neck of central Wisconsin, Amherst, Wisconsin, or Lanark, he was on the borders of Amherst, which is just the county over from me. He, according to the late great Gray Barker, in his seminal UFO book, They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers, which has one of the greatest overviews of the Shaver mystery I've ever read in that book, which was an early mid-1950s UFO book. According to Gray Barker, who knew both Palmer and Shaver had told him that he had moved to Amherst, Wisconsin, because there was a Terror colony beneath Amherst, Wisconsin. And the Terror were the good people. They were the integrative underground people who protected him from the interference of the Darrow. So according to Shaver, these entrances were everywhere.
I'm looking here. I'm going to pull this up here in just a second. I have the maps of the cave system underneath Los Angeles. And yeah, I've got it right here. Okay. And the article, one of the main articles in the LA Times is called The Lost City of the Lizard People. Yeah.
Oh, I have heard about that.
Yeah. And so LA, hold on, I'm going to pull this up here. This was in the LA Times, LA maps. Okay, let's just do this. Boom, done. And this is, the reason why I find this also interesting and is very important to this show today is this predates everything by over 40 years. From the Ray Palmer thing. Strange coincidence, but the elevator part of this and what was discussed a lot on Long John Nebel is underneath major cities. And then we have this story. This is from the LA Times. You ready? Check that out.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is from 18, it's all here too. Bunker Hill, all the hills, it's all here. And it's pretty nuts. There is a bunch of, and you can go and look. Okay, hold on for a second. I thought I had okay, I'm going to get off of this. I don't want to delay the show, but there's also the original newspaper articles. Here's one here. This is from 1933. This is the LA Times. Here's the headline: Lizard People's Catacomb Undercity Hunted. And so there's all these photographs of people underneath Los Angeles in these cave systems and with photographs. So yeah, it's totally worth the rabbit hole jump down, man.
Fantastic.
It's pretty cool. Stay right there, Dean. Let's take our break. We're going to do that now. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. Dean Bertram is with us tonight. We're talking about the Shaver mystery. I'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Go Backley Tappy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. Jimmy Church, Gaia TV, Fade to Black, here at Machu Picchu with Brian Forster and Hidden Inca Tours. Amazing tour so far, Brian, but we're here to announce what we're going to do next year in 2026. What's going on?
Okay, November 2026, we're going to have our major tour of Peru and Bolivia, either a pre or post tour of Paracas and Nazca on the coast. And then after that, 6 days in Easter Island.
Bucket list, Easter Island. Come join Brian and I and his amazing team here at Hidden Inca Tours for Peru, Bolivia, and Easter Island. Signing out. Say goodbye, Brian.
Bye, gang.
River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back. Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Dean Bertram is with us, PhD, by the way. Well earned. I'll never have one. Is with us. We're talking about the Shaver mystery. I do want to mention, I'll give a big shout out to Ernest Skinner. I was a guest on his podcast today, and you can check it out at Border City Rock Talk. Head over to YouTube, and it's probably already up. And big shout out to Ernest. Great questions, great conversation. Yeah, we did rock and roll and UFOs. My 2 favorite things. My 2 favorite things. Absolutely. All right, let's get back to it. Here, I want to jump into another part of all of this because it's always about bring the receipts, right? And where's the evidence? What's going on here? And Shaver attempted to provide that stuff, and we'll get to that. But then to add to all of this, and I've seen a lot of presentations at different conferences about the Shaver mystery and all of is Admiral Byrd and his expedition down to Antarctica. And I still I'm serious, Dean. To this day, I don't know what to make of that. The expedition did occur. Why did he go down there with armed men, right? Thousands, and aircraft, and then the things that are attributed to him in his statements come from a newspaper. I think it was in Argentina when he was coming back, and the publication put these quotes out that are still there to this day. Those comments that Admiral Byrd made are only really sourced from that one spot, but it starts to support the Shaver mystery, doesn't it?
Yeah, I can't speak to whether those stories are factual or not. Certainly, it seems super mysterious, his expeditions down there, considering they seem to be some kind of quasi-military force, and there's all kinds of rumors that maybe the Nazis post-World War II had some kind of base there, or maybe he was investigating the type of things that Ray Palmer suggested after the Shaver mystery, that there were entries to the poles, both at or entries to the inner Earth, both at the North Pole and at the South Pole. So I don't know if I'm capable of dissecting that as an historian to whether the factuality of it or not. I certainly know it's a big part of the story as far as our idea on the Hollow Earth. I also will say personally, there's something very strange about Antarctica, like the kind of the international treaties and the inability for people to go there. Like there is definitely a weirdness there. And I think whenever there is a closure of space, whether it's like closure around Area 51 or whether it's closure around, Antarctica, I think that by nature builds people's suspicion. Like there's something about, if there's a space on the map that we can't get to, then why can't we get to it? What's being hidden there from us? And I think that's a legitimate question to ask. Why can't I just go down tomorrow to Antarctica? Like say I'm worth millions of dollars and can get, a private plane there and go and look around. Why can't I just go and wander around down there?
Why can't you get a snowmobile and go until it ends?
Right.
And I don't know about you, but I have Google Earth Pro, right? Okay. Not Google Earth. There is a Google Earth Professional. And Antarctica is grayed out. You can go there. You can go there right now. You can go, the edges are there, right? But the center, and it's all mapped. It's all photographed. It's the most photographed thing on planet Earth. We've got every kind of geostationary imaging satellites, all over everything there, including Google Earth. But no, not that, man. It stops. It's grayed out. You can't see it. Why? I mean, why? If it's just ice, right? What's the big deal? But no, they've got it grayed out for sure. Yeah, it's another part of this. And then Admiral Byrd made a couple of comments. Again, historically, I can't really tie this to him direct, like it, he verified this, but he said while flying that they witnessed craft that could circle the Earth in an hour. Those are big words from back then. I mean, that was just beyond any comprehension. It's still beyond comprehension today. And that there was an entrance to the inner Earth. Going back to the Shaver, that's the core part of the Shaver mystery, is the inner Earth. What's your definition of that?
Well, I think there are different interpretations of what the inner Earth is. There's the idea of a hollow Earth, and there are various ideas of what that entails. One of the versions is the idea of, I guess, there's a crust on the planet, and we're on the upside of the crust, and underneath the crust there's another civilization which operates on the other side of the crust. There was also weird Nazi hollow Earth theories that imagine it kind of inverted, like we were living on the inside of the crust. And Berger and Powell's talk about this a little bit in their kind of classic, again, von Daniken book, The Morning of the Magicians. This idea that the Nazis had these concepts of hollow earth and we were on the inside, and we kind of could, maybe we were looking through it sometimes, maybe we weren't. They had, apparently, the Nazis even spent a whole lot of money working on a kind of early radar sonar idea where they would point it up, thinking that, okay, if we're in the North Sea, if we point it up, we'll be pointing it at England. Like, there was this real idea in Nazi Germany for a while that there was a hollow earth and we were on the inside, apparently. I think the shaver idea is subtly different to the earlier version I talked about. The earth's hollow and there's a civilization on the inside walking around on the other side of the crust. Shaver's version seemed to suggest that there was an extensive cavern world, not so much that the world itself was hollow, but that there was a cavern system which was maybe somewhat pre-existent, but also built out extensively and tunneled more extensively by the Atlans and Terrans or Titans rather, the Atlans and the Titans in those early days when they were trying to escape the sun's rays. So I think there's various versions of what the hollow earth means. And this goes back even beyond Shaver, of course, the idea of Sheol or hell being beneath the planet, the idea of the underworld in Greek and Roman mythology being underneath the planet, the idea in fairy faith in Ireland that the fairies had somehow, the Tathudawanan had somehow gone underground to another civilization. So I think there have been attempts by various scientists and pseudoscientists in the 18th and 19th century to imagine the way a hollow earth actually might operate, including holes at the poles. And then there are other earlier traditions, which I think Shaver might fit in a little bit more neatly, about underground civilizations which have built cavern worlds underneath our planet.
Could the world handle what is actually going on, combined with, I'm talking about a reality, some paradigm shift that pops up? Because right now we have elected officials in Washington, right? So, well, maybe these UFOs are just us from before, that they've always been here, living in our oceans, living underground. These are our elected officials,
right?
Dean.
This is Shaver. This is Shaver being talked about in Congress now. It's the weirdest.
That's right. What the hell's going on? And what if this does play out with something like that? Can the world handle some crazy thing?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that's a really good question. What would people be more disturbed by? The idea that there's extraterrestrials visiting the planet, which has been pretty much spoon-fed to them from science fiction, even before the alien invasion movies of the 1950s, but certainly since the alien invasion movies of the 1950s, The Day the Earth Stood Still, or the War of the Worlds, or Earth versus the Flying Saucers, or Fill It All In, all the way up to the X-Files and Men in Black and beyond to today. Or that there is a crypto-terrestrial civilization talked about by people like Hal Puthoff in recent papers, people from Harvard in recent papers, dating back and even quoting Shaver, like even looking back at Shaver. Would it be more difficult for people to think that there's an advanced civilization existing beneath the surface of this planet, maybe beneath the oceans of this planet, interacting with us? Like, I think
we would lose our minds.
I think so too. I think the second is less culturally acceptable because we haven't. But I mean, since Palmer's attempts and Shaver's attempts in Amazing Stories and in Palmer's magazines after that, I don't think people are as enculturated to that idea as they are to ETs visiting us from the distance. If this civilization lived here, like next to us, that is scarier, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Our ability, and you study this, but and I realize I'm preaching to the choir, but our ability to understand just increases every day. Every day that rolls by, we are able to understand a little bit more. That's just the way nature works. Okay. So understanding the size of the universe, which we're grappling with now, but what we do understand about the universe, that every star's got a planet. There are trillions of stars in the Milky Way. There are trillions and trillions of galaxies. Therefore, there is a buttload of life out there. We're okay with that. We've been, you know what I mean? Our ability to understand that. Our ability to understand Atlantis, right? Sure. Oh, that's a whole nother thing, man. The ice melts in Antarctica and they find some, million-year-old city underneath the ice. I don't know if we can handle that. ET would be passé.
It's interesting. I think one of the reasons Shaver's ideas, let's call it Shaverism because people use that term, didn't ignite as well as some other ideas. Incidentally, like L. Ron Hubbard was writing Dianetics in the competitive magazine Astounding. Like that's where he first wrote his pieces. And obviously Scientology became a massive thing with big church systems and hundreds of thousands of members and all kinds of influences around the world. But that system had the idea that you could improve, that there was happiness. The UFO contactees, people like Adamski onwards, had the idea of some type of spiritual enlightenment. So that was very attractive to people. Shaver's interpretation of the cosmos and our immediate environment was not as positive. It was nowhere near as positive. It was that there are these beings under the planet and the bad guys outnumber the good guys and the good guys help us sometimes, who are the Terror. They help us sometimes, but they're facing a constant, battle against the Darrow who are always beating them. The Darrow are just hitting us with these rays, sending weird voices into our head, causing us to fall downstairs, causing us to be in plane accidents, causing us to kill people, starting wars. Shaver had no spiritual happy ending. Shaver's only hope was that the governments of the world would listen to what he was saying and somehow we would get a military expedition together and go down into the caverns and kill those damn Darrow and take their technology. There was no happiness. Like most religious versions of reality have some kind of, calming belief system that makes you happy. Shaver's belief system had none of this. He was an atheist. He had no spiritualism in him. He thought that there was a practical evil threatening us and had been haunting the planet from before, we existed as a species as we do now. They were here before us and they were menacing us constantly. So it's hard to convince people to jump onto that kind of cosmology. And that, I think, is exactly what you're saying today. It would be so hard to tell people where they're not advanced space brothers like Stephen Greer says, or, there's no happy, the day the earth stood still messaging. These are hideous creatures below the surface who wish us nothing but ill will, according to Shaver. And we better get down there and fight them in some extensive military battle to win. Like, that's not a happy theology you can get people to jump onto.
It's really funny how, and I fall victim to this too. Okay. But we always are hoping for a hero, somebody that's going to come and save us. It's all going to be all right. We got to go through some shit first, but then it's all going to get better. Right. And the hero's journey, right. It always plays out that way. But what if ET shows up and we ask him, okay, man, so when will it get better? It doesn't. Right. What do you mean? Oh, no. You're going to chase eternal bliss forever.
Right.
It never happens. It just gets worse. What if that's the message? Like the Darrow, it's just like, well, there's good Darrow, right? Nope. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's so weird. All of and it doesn't matter what the alien invasion movie is. Us, Trailer Park Earth, managed to defeat an interstellar species with particle beam weapons, right? And whatever they have, but we defeat them with a Colt 45 and a couple Molotov cocktails. Right? And that we're going to win this, so we don't have to worry about it. And that is something that's been spoon-fed to as well, that, man, we're mankind, we're humans, and dang it, we can figure this out.
Yeah, and Shaver's life ends in poverty in a cabin in Summit, Arkansas that I've been to in 1975, penniless, still trying to convince the planet to listen to him. But perhaps if he'd been like Hubbard and had some, methodology where you could become a more successful thetan or whatever and get there, maybe that would have worked. But his whole message was, we're in real trouble. There was no happy ending to it.
Did he ever help me understand this part? Because it's a very interesting part of the story. He talked about artifacts. He talked about written languages. He talked about finding these stone tablets and things. Did any of that stuff ever make it to the public?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's the final chapter, really, of the Shaver mystery. So when he lived near me in Amherst/Lanark, Wisconsin, from 1949 to about 1963, 64, when he had to flee in a scandal, which is a whole nother story. But while he was there, his wife Dorothy had discovered these pebbles that she thought looked like they had little figures, like little images of little figures and little faces in them. And she put them on his desk apparently and said, look at these, look into these pebbles. It looks like there's images in them of faces and figures and people. And apparently Shaver paid no attention for a couple of weeks, and then he was just sitting at his desk and he happened to, pick them up and look at them. And lo and behold, what did he see? Little faces and little figures. And at first he thought he had somehow, where he was on top of some ancient temple. He began to dig up these rocks, which he was convinced was what he called rock fogo, rock books. They were somehow these ancient artifacts which this advanced civilization in the past had imprinted these imagery and this story in the books, and he didn't in the rocks, and he didn't have the technology to properly access them anymore. So he had to cut the rocks into fine pieces. And even then, all he would capture was like if you saw multiple images of a film frame laid on top of each other, so multiple faces imprinted on each other. But he did his best to try to turn this into images people could understand. And he created all of this art based on this. He would project the images from the rocks onto a canvas, and he did this relatively sophisticated process where he tried to bring out the images more. And so the last 2 decades of Richard Shaver's life were him trying to convince the world that he had found proof of what he had written about in Amazing Stories of this pre-diluvial civilization. Now, for the most part, the world ignored him, and he was essentially forgotten. Even in Summit, he had in front of his house a little sign saying, "Look, rock art, come in and look at it." And he would sit on his front lawn with tables with this art he had made and with these rocks he had cut up. I have a number of his rocks, which I'm very lucky to have obtained when I went to Summit and I met one of the old owners of his house. And I spoke to somebody in Summit who knew him and his wife, though, and she said, as far as I'm aware, nobody ever bought any of these rocks, none of his art. He would ship it out to fanzines and science fiction and UFO type independent publications to try to get them interested in it. Ray Palmer published a book which included some of Palmer's artwork in it, but for some of Shaver's artwork and rocks in it. For the most part, he made no impression. But after his death, the fascinating thing is, many years after, he became recognized, which he never intended, as an underground artist. They had showings of his rock art in major museums and galleries in places like New York City and LA and San Francisco. I met and interviewed, he's in the film, one of the major, I suppose, dealers of Shaver artwork, Brian Emmerich, who's the major owner of the remaining Shaver artwork, has become one of the producers of the feature, The Man Who Invented Flying Saucers. And he has an incredible collection of Shaver rock art and rock books and his photos.
Dean, what does that tell you about Richard Shaver? That he stands by his original writings, and that this was something that he truly believed in and wanted the world to know about? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. He never wavered. Like, people often
Right.
have accused there being some kind of hoaxery around the Shaver mystery. Whatever
Mhm.
the reality of the mystery or not, I don't think either Ray Palmer nor Richard Shaver intended this as a hoax. I think they both believed in different ways. We could get into Palmer's version of his belief. He thought it was more of a spiritual experience that Richard Shaver had, but Richard Shaver, until his dying day, said this was a physical experience. And the denouement to Shaver's story, which I might share quickly, which I think you'll enjoy, is that it's a story that wasn't published during his lifetime. The late, great Timothy Green Beckley published in a book on Richard Shaver and the Inner Earth, edited by a friend of mine, Tim Schwartz, who also
Yeah,
appeared.
I have the book. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's a great book. So you know the story. So
I do.
in his final days in Summit, Arkansas, near the end of his life, he had been always out there looking for rock books, and he finally found, because remember, again, he didn't think he had the technology to read it properly, but according to Shaver, he finally unearthed a rock book that still had power in it. And it worked and this is before we had like the term AI. Like he wrote this, remember, he died in 75. So this is towards the end of his life, the early to mid 70s. He said that this rock book still had power, and it worked like what we today would call an AI system. It projected forth this image of this beautiful being that in many ways looks like a UFO contactee. Shaver himself, a UFO alien contact from people like Adamski experiences, a beautiful being in blue coveralls. And Shaver at the time even said, this reminds me of the weird stuff I've read in Adamski. So he was reluctant at first, but this being appeared to him and said, you can access the thought records of Lemuria. These records that Shaver said he had already accessed when he was in the cavern world. And so this rock book that he discovered began to lose power, though, and he continued to look for more rock books. And when he was on a hillside, which I think I've been to what I thought was it in Summit, Arkansas. He was out there. He drove out there. He parked his car. He was looking for more rock books, and he said, all of a sudden, the world went quiet. It's like the Oz effect, which Jenny Randles has talked about. The earth went quiet. All the crickets stopped cheeping. He couldn't hear any birds singing. The wind stopped blowing. And it was like this great giant glass jar had been dropped around him, and he passed out. And when he came to, he was back where he hadn't been for decades. He was back in the cavern world. He was a prisoner again of the Darrow, which he said he'd been in the past. And the Darrow tortured him. They used I don't know what the audience level of your show is, so I'll make it clean. They used their stim rays upon him, which caused kind of, sexual energy. And he kind of partook in something which, an adult kind of activity. And then the Darrow who were there, they threatened him. They said, if you don't do what we tell you to do, we're going to tell your wife about what we did. We might even hurt your wife. We're going to destroy your life. We want that rock book back, the functioning rock book that you got. He passed out again. When he came to, he was back on the hillside, and he went back to his car. It was night now. It was dark. He thought he'd been there for days, much like fairy faith, like in fairy lore, people don't know. And in alien abductions as well, they don't know how long they've gone for, right? He sped home to his wife in his small rock cottage in Summit, Arkansas, this beautiful, tiny little cottage, which is still there. And he thought his wife was going to be really worried, but she didn't seem that worried. Oh, he'd only been gone for a couple of hours. Oh, I'm glad you're home. I've got your dinner on the stove. But that night, he took that rock and he took it back to the hillside, and he left it there for the Darrow, his semi-functioning rock book. And that's pretty much the end of the Shaver mystery.
I never take anything. I put it back. I don't care what ancient site I am. I don't do it. There's a place in Egypt. It's called Elephant Island. You know about Elephant Island?
No, tell me about it.
Right outside of Luxor. It's too long of a story. But Elephant Island is the basis of Indiana Jones and the Holy Grail, and or the Ark, right? And the Nazis going and looking for the Ark, right? Okay, so the movie is based on Elephant Island, which is a real place. And so when you go there, and I can't say why I know this, but I'll just say this. The Ark is still there. Okay. All right. That's it. I'm going to leave that part there. But when you go to Elephant Island, the original Third Reich, right? Archaeological offices are still there. And they spent years digging on that island, looking for the Ark. And it's part of this when we hear these stories and how the stories are real, like they're based in reality. It's just a part of all of this. So when you go to Elephant Island and you know about the Ark being there in Germany, while you're walking, everywhere you go, everywhere you're walking over broken pottery. Okay, so you can look down. I'm not, Dean, in any way exaggerating. You can take a step and look down and see pottery with hieroglyphs on it.
Good
and
grief.
and pick it up. Now, the temptation, right? Nobody's going to miss that. No, you put that down. You look at it. Don't take it with you. Don't. I find stuff all the time around the world. I don't take it with me. That's a curse, man. That I believe in curses. I do. They just don't. You don't disturb that stuff. But I want to mention this to you. This is where this whole story for me gets whack. My own personal experience. Up in Washington, that string of volcanoes, Mount Rainier, Mount Adams, you know what I mean? St. Helens, right? All the way across, there's everywhere you look up there, there's a dormant volcano, man. They're everywhere. So I'm up there. Again, this is a long story. I'm going to give you the short version. I'm right there, man. So Kenneth Arnold had his sighting between Mount Rainier and Mount Adams.
Right.
Okay. All right. I'm up there. I'm at Mount Adams with 200 or 300 fadernauts, my friends. And I'm about 14 miles away from Mount Adams, which is in front. It's right there, right? It's, snow covered. And I'm out there with about 30 friends, and I've got a pair of binoculars. It's 3:00 in the afternoon at Kenneth Arnold's spot. And at that moment, and we're all goofing around, and I've got these binoculars, and I'm looking at birds. I'm looking at Mount Adams. It's like Jenny Randall says, right? It all goes quiet. And so we're sitting there, and I'm looking through the binocular, and from behind Mount Adams comes this craft in the middle of the day. Wow. And I've told the story many times. You're hearing this for the first time. So it's called the beer can. It looked like a can. It's about 400 feet tall, cylindrical. And let me change cameras. It's doing this, and it comes out from behind the mountain, and it's going across the sky. No clouds, nothing. And the sun is and I see it, right? I'm in the binocular, and I lose my mind. I can't believe what I'm seeing, and I see it spinning. It's perfectly in focus.
Wow.
And I come back off of the thing, and I jump up and I start yelling, camera, video, pictures. And I'm freaking out. I'm losing my mind. Everybody's looking at it. And I look at it with the naked eye, and it's like this big. It's 14 miles away, right? It comes out from behind the mountain. I got these giant binoculars, and the binoculars, it's full size. So I go back to the binoculars. This is about 5-10 seconds later. I'm in the binoculars, and I just look at it, man. I look at it from top to bottom. I just get it burned into my brain. And I come back out, and I'm looking at it. I'm watching it spin, and I could see the sun reflecting off of it. I come back to the binoculars, and then my friend next to me, Steve, goes, "It phased out." What? It was gone.
Goodness me.
Yeah. And so, and I'm like, what do you mean? And I thought we were going to see it for the next hour because it was moving so slow, and it was the blue sky, and there's nothing there. And we're having the most incredible sighting, and it was gone. Gone. Right at that spot for Kenneth Arnold. I don't know. I can't explain. And I say this all the time. And I know that you can appreciate this. I don't know what I saw. Okay. I don't know if it's ET. I don't know if it was us. I have no idea. I can tell you what it wasn't. It wasn't a rocket. It wasn't a helicopter. It wasn't a jet. It wasn't that. It wasn't a balloon. It wasn't any of those things. It was just a spinning, just going across the sky like this. Giant, huge. When I say 400 feet, I don't know. From 14 miles away, it was that big. So how big was the object? I don't know. But it was right there. And it just throws another part. I'm going to chase the truth until I get as close to it as I can. But you see something like that and you tie it to the area and everything else. And what am I left with? It's doing shows like this and discussing all of this and trying to get to the bottom of it. And with the way pop culture is moving today, you doing what you do in the world of weird, what do we do with the media now accepting this, and politicians and elected officials talking about this in the Pentagon and UFO hearings, and suddenly the ridicule and tease factor is being lifted off of this and the subject is being discussed like it is. What do you make of that versus the historical version of this? It seems very strange. Are we at a turning point?
In a way, but just and I want to answer that very much because it's something I'm really interested in. But I do think where you saw that, it's a weird part of the world. Like you mentioned, like Mount St. Helens, that's where Ape Canyon is. Arnold saw what kicked off the flying saucer thing right where you saw that. Mount Rainier hovers over Maury Island, like where the Maury Island incident happened. I think that's important to say quickly too. When you're on Maury Island and you're looking back across the Puget Sound where the incident happened, the Maury Island incident, towards Tacoma, Seattle, Maury Island is, at least Mount Rainier is right in front of you. This is a weird part of the world where all kinds of weird things happen. Now, to the question that you asked, one of the things I found strangest in the disclosure movement, and also the most interesting, is that, as we all know, in 2017, with the New York Times article about, the Tic Tac videos and ATIP, this, Pentagon secret
UFO. Yeah.
And then the narrative tended to change. Like every major media outlet started to talk about this. The US government started to talk about this because pretty much since, the late 1960s, when the Condon Committee, the University of Colorado UFO study, which had been when the Air Force, under the pressure of Congress back then, had fobbed the UFO story to the University of Colorado, and the Condon Committee, with many, many problems, essentially came out and said, there's nothing to see here. It had never really been taken serious by the media since. I mean, it had been like there'd been shows like X-Files, and when the Roswell 50th anniversary came up, Larry King was out at Roswell doing his live from there, and there were stories, but it hadn't been something which either the government or the media seemed to take seriously since it had been put to bed by the Condon Committee back in the late 1960s. But after that 2017 article, things seemed to change. And what I don't think at first the public and the media really caught onto was that the key figures in the disclosure movement started to suggest that this thing wasn't extraterrestrial. Whether you're looking at the journalists who are beating the drum the hardest, like Keane, who co-wrote that original article, like Tucker Carlson, who has been fascinated with this for some time, or whether you're looking at the whistleblowers themselves, whether it's David Grush, whether it's other people, whether it's people like Tom DeLonge, the Blink-182 Angels and Airwaves frontman, who then started to the Stars Academy, which was pushing this and releasing the Tic Tac videos. I think that organization released it first, whether it was Hal Puthoff, who wrote a piece on ultra-terrestrials and also was a board member to the Stars Academy. person after person after person who were the main identities in the disclosure movement was saying that this thing isn't extraterrestrial. Whatever it is, it's not ET. And I still don't think we've culturally got a hold on that. But when I look at the most important people who've been publicizing this, you're starting to see it in the last UFO congressional hearing, the one which was earlier this month. There you start to get even the Congress people, I think, realizing that there's something weirder here, that there's something which this mightn't be extraterrestrial. This might be something far stranger than what we've been led to believe by science fiction and potentially by disinfo coming out of the various spin agencies that have played with this for a very long time. Quickly, I will say, I think a lot of this technology is just ours. I think potentially the Tic Tac is just ours, and it's testing it on, US Navy pilots, because where would you test state-of-the-art technology? You'd start to test it on your own pilots to see how they'd respond, right? But I think the deeper, weirder mysteries that you and I are primarily interested in, I think there has been an ongoing conversation now that the media, the mainstream media, not people like you and I, but the mainstream media haven't covered, but maybe they will shortly, and I hope that they do, that this is far stranger than nuts and bolts tin cans from another solar system or, another galaxy or, whatever, and maybe it's something weirder. Maybe Shaver was closer to the truth. Maybe Ray Palmer was even closer. Ray Palmer was saying even before John Keel and Jacques Vallée was saying things. He was saying it wasn't extraterrestrial in the mid-1960s. He was saying whatever this is, it's not ET. There's no proof I can see that it's an interplanetary craft. And then, of course, Keel and Vallée and other people wrote this later, that this thing seems to fit closer with other paranormal phenomena, which we're all experiencing.
But what does this do? Because now we get into an idea, a form that H.P. Lovecraft was a documentarian. Right. That's a Pandora's box. That is a crazy thing to open, because suddenly all of the pragmatic, non-spiritual, black and white, chemical-based scientists out there, right, are all wrong, right? And that have been preaching to us about how they know everything, and this is the way the world works. And suddenly all of that gets tipped over. So does anthropology. So does archaeology, right? Everything suddenly is the opposite. We're in Superman Bizarro world. And that's the crazy part. I don't know. And okay. I mean, is that where we're headed? Is that something, you know what I mean? Where everything, well, okay. Think 180 degrees and those are the facts. Right? Flip it over. That's the real truth. Everything that you have based your life on is not reality. And that's where we're headed if that's the case.
It's worth noting that Richard Shaver, in his introduction to his second Shaver mystery story, Thought Records of Lemuria and Amazing Stories, said that A. Merritt, who was a great influence on H.P. Lovecraft, had essentially got it right in his fiction about this underground reality. And later, in a letter that Richard Shaver wrote to Vampire magazine, which was a big fanzine of the day, he said that Lovecraft's essentially right. This is what's going on.
Right.
So my point, you brought up Lovecraft, which is great, but it's fantastic that people like Shaver and Palmer was saying the same thing back in the 1940s.
Now, okay, so here, let me suggest this. Having references to Lockheed or whoever, right, testing stuff against our own armed forces, all right, with the Tic Tac, that's fine. But what do we do with historical sightings that are before the Wright brothers? What do we do with that? That goes back up all the way to the Bible, right? So many ancient scripts, throughout time. woodcuts from the 1500s. What do we do with all of that? Nuremberg.
I think we face a real problem in trying to work out how to approach this, and there's two weird tiers that I always come back to, and one of them is what you were saying kind of then, is that maybe the UFO community or UFO researchers conflate various things to be the same thing. So, for example, maybe the Tic Tac video is our own advanced technology. Maybe tonight somebody sees Venus and mistakes it for a flying saucer. Maybe at the back of my 40 here, I just see swamp gas. But maybe the thing standing at the edge of my bed tonight, which I think is an ET, is something far older and weirder and stranger. And all of those things have nothing to do with each other, but because the UFO research community is interested in one thing, extraterrestrials visiting us, they conflate all of this to be the same thing. The flip side is the paranormal community, which is divided into all these different groups. So people who are interested in ghosts are over here, listening to potentially the EVP of their great aunt in the back of the family estate. Over here, people are chasing what they think are, flesh and blood, undiscovered American apes or relict hominids. Over here, people are looking at the skies, thinking that they're ETs. Maybe there is a paranormal phenomenon there, which isn't phenomena, which isn't all these different things, but is the same thing. And so to approach it, you get lost in this kind of weird maze of, you want to bring it all together, but at the same time you want to spit it all out into different parts. It's so hard to get a handle on it, because if you're looking at something, how do you first discover that that's truly anomalous and not a mistaken, identification, or just us testing advanced technology? And then maybe when you do have a genuine contact with something which you want to think is extraterrestrial, maybe it's something far older and something far weirder and far interconnected with all these other paraphysical experiences. So I didn't even know, I'm not a researcher, I'm an historian, thank goodness, because I'm not sure how as a researcher you get this.
Isn't this what, I'm looking at the clock, I feel like we could go on for hours. Isn't this exactly what John Keel and Jacques Vallée have been referencing? Jacques Vallée, a scientist, a researcher on one side, John Keel, brilliant imagination, but we're always alluding to this same thing, that it's far stranger. We keep thinking about, metal craft with little dudes in it, right? But it's maybe not that at all. And these ideas of interdimensional and multi-worlds and parallel worlds, and that aspect of it comes into play. And that could be the ghost that people have been seeing for millennia, right? And spirit beings and orbs and I could go on and on. Ball lightning, right? Ball lightning, one of the most how do I say, one of the best ancient myths there are, right? Ball lightning. It's talked about in science, never really captured, has been seen. Or is that just spirits and orbs and interdimensional light energy that other cultures have been talking about for thousands of years? I don't know, but maybe it's just all the same thing, right?
Listen, my entry point to this was John Keel, to be honest with you. I was somebody who was very sympathetic to the extraterrestrial hypothesis. And then when I discovered Keel, and after Keel Vallée, I was like, this is far weirder than what I thought it was. Ironically, Raymond Palmer, who has all but been forgotten by history other than by people like you and I, Palmer was saying the exact same thing even before Keel and Vallée was saying it. And later, towards the end of his life, in his last speech, which I think was in 1977, shortly before he died, he begged people to start looking at all of this as being the same. And he literally goes through it, whether it's flying saucers, interdimensional stuff, the world itself, all of this somehow comes together to be something that we can't we can't process independently of each other. And I think the one great lesson, and again, this is somebody who's not an investigator in the field, but I wish if I could have one message to people who are researchers and investigators in the field is, if you can look at whatever your pet project is, again, whether it's cryptozoology or spectre hunting or, religious apparitions or UFOs, and maybe see how does this connect with other things. I don't know if we're ever going to get to the truth, or we're ever going to get to the final proof or the reality of this, but maybe looking at it that way will make us ask better questions.
Here's okay. You probably know what I'm about to ask you. I think one of the best things for anybody that goes, well, you know what? This is too far out for me. Well, it's fun, but they haven't seen anything. All right, they haven't. When somebody is so cemented in their belief systems, you cannot talk them out of it. You can't. All the evidence you want to present, all the documentaries, all the books, you can send them off on their... No. All it's going to do is strengthen their position, no matter what the subject is. It doesn't matter, right? Until they see it for themselves. Have you seen something in the sky?
I haven't seen something in the sky, but to be totally transparent, I'll have to make this real quick because it's a long story. My entire interest in this subject probably began when I was a young boy, probably around 5 years of age. I had what would be called a night visitation consistently. Something came to my room many, many times when I was little.
This was in Australia?
This was in Australia, and my shorthand for it has always been the little man, and my slightly longer shorthand for the entire experience has been that the little man took me away. And there was something that came to me, and it didn't look like a grey extraterrestrial. It looked far more folkloric. It looked far more stunted. It looked far more like the Fuseli, which I hadn't seen then, the painting The Nightmare, where that creature is sitting on the woman's chest and she's kind of got her hands, rolled back, and there's a head's horse. It was something little and weird, but it came to my room every night, or regularly anyway. I shouldn't say every night because I've got no recollection if it was every night, but it was more than once. It was many, many times. And it took me away. And I have no recollection of where I went except for one recollection. And my recollection is that the little man came, and I was scared, as I always was. And when it wasn't like I wasn't drawn up through the roof or there was no tractor beam or he didn't throw me over his shoulder and jump out the window. But then the next experience was I was in this place, which was better lit than compared to my bedroom. And there were all these very tall beings. And I remember being next to me. For some reason, I thought it was my mother, potentially because when you're little and you're at, your parents' parties or at a school excursion or at the shopping center, your parents are tall and you tug on their leg to get your attention. My daughter did that when she was little, always was tugging on like my jacket or my jeans or something. And I tugged on its leg, and then the thing bent down and put its head. I'm trying to do this fast because I know we're running out of time. Its head was inches from mine, and it wasn't my mother, and it wasn't anything human, and it was terrifying. And I remember the little man far clearer because I had multiple experiences with him, and I only remember this once, and I don't like to try to describe what it looked like. It wasn't a grey extraterrestrial, I'll say that, but because I think I've been tainted by so much science fiction and horror movie imagery, but it was terrifying. And then that's the end of my recollection of that. The denouement to the story is one night I knew the little man was coming for me, and I was really, really scared. And when he came, unlike normally where I guess was submissive and went along with him, I resisted him and I fought him. And I didn't fight him like a boxer. It wasn't like Rocky. I wasn't like punching him upside the head. But I remember physically wrestling with him. And that's the scariest part of the memory, because I remember having physical altercations with other boys at that time, and the physical memory is the same. And I don't want to say I beat him, but I certainly came to some kind of impasse, and he left and he never came back. And obviously there are more details, but that's the little man story. And years later, when I was between my Bachelor of Arts degree and my master's degree, I picked up a book by an author called Edith Fiore. And she was a writer. She was a psychologist, and she was talking about the alien abduction experience. And her things triggered my memories. And so for a while I thought maybe I'm an abductee. I don't think I was a traditional alien abductee. I think it fits far tighter in with older fairy faith traditions. I don't think I was taken by grey extraterrestrials and experimented on. I really don't. And I don't even know if it was just my childhood psyche trying to deal with something. But that they are very, and memory's a funny thing. This is decades ago now, but it's something which has stayed with me for my entire life. And that, reading Edith Fiore's book, is what launched me on my interests, post my bachelor's degree, into the realm of flying saucers and UFOs. Before I realized I don't think I'm an alien abductee. But that's,
and what's interesting here, to the best of your recollection, that this wasn't a dream state. This was a physical experience that was happening. This wasn't your imagination that has been repeated into an actual memory. This was a physical being in your room. It was a physical experience.
That's the scariest thing about the denouement of it that I mentioned, that the physical struggle of it is so similar to other. I have a couple of memories of fighting other boys at that age, like the physical struggle, and the memory of it is as real as that. I mean, I would like to say it was just my childhood psyche going through something and it was a continuous nightmare, but to be entirely honest, that isn't the way some of it plays out.
Wow. Did you ever communicate with this being?
No, I mean, I can't remember ever having a conversation. I can remember that like I said, the thing was kind of stunted, but like it didn't look like a child though. It was probably my size. It was more fairy faithic, gnomic kind of like, I guess, the kind of like almost the little actors that you see in Todd Browning's Freaks, or in
oh wow,
right, yeah, you know what I mean. They were kind of, yeah, it was like a little person, or in like Wizard of Oz, but stockier, like more solid. And I remember it smiling, but the smile was never friendly. Wow. But no conversations. I can't remember a single conversation.
Wow. Well, that would, see, there's another part to that. Once that is there, then that's the journey. The journey is always a personal one. You have your own personal reason, so you're doing the Weird Festival, right? Or whatever it is, right? It's something with weird tied into it. Okay. And people find that interesting. They don't know why, this personal experience has set you on this path, but it's always a personal reason. It's always something deeply personal, because that gives you the drive.
Great.
Yeah, that's incredible. Where can everybody follow? I know we've got your Facebook page up. Where can everybody else chase you down?
Well, yeah, the man who invented flying saucers on Facebook, or you can just go to theshavermystery.com and it will take you to the same place, which is about my short documentary, The Shaver Mystery, and my upcoming feature documentary, The Man Who Invented Flying Saucers. I'm also on the Untold Radio Network every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Central. And I think they can just go to untoldradioam.com to find that. It's Talking Weird is my show. I also, as you mentioned, I run a film festival called Midwest WeirdFest. That's just midwestweirdfest.com. We're in our 10th year now. We're always the first weekend or so of March in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. We play paranormal documentaries and horror and science fiction and weird offbeat stuff and all kinds of other wonderful things. I got to get you out there, Jimmy, one day. That'd be a heck of a fun time.
I would love to do that. I will also be in Wisconsin in May, in Delavan. If you know where Delavan is.
I don't. I have to get along to it to actually meet you in person.
Just come and hang out with us. It's a great festival and a great conference, and it's at Delavan Lake at the resort there. Great line. I'm the host. I'm going to speak. I'll speak on one of the nights. But just come out and hang out with us, man. It is so much fun. Delavan, it's just west of Milwaukee.
My girlfriend and I will come. We love to go to conventions. We were at Milwaukee Paracon last year, which was a blast. I presented the Shaver Mystery stuff there. So I'll come down for this. That'll be fun.
Okay. You know what? I might be able to get you. Man, maybe. All right. You know what? I'm going to talk to you off of the air. My brain is turning, but I've got an idea. All right.
I do a nice Shaver Mystery presentation. Just
Dean, I'll talk to you off the air. Okay. Let's not get ahead of our skis. Thank you so much, man. Perfect night. Thank you so much. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Man, it was great. Thank you so much for having me on Fade to Black, Jimmy. It was a real pleasure.
Dean, thank you so much. Dean Bertram, everybody. Go enjoy the rest of your evening there in beautiful Wisconsin. Thank you so much, Dean. Perfect night on the show. This does wrap my week. I do want to let everybody know that nothing is happening tomorrow. I am on the air. There's no news. No Christina Gomez, no Fade to Black tomorrow night. Heading down to San Diego. So I will see everybody there that is going to come down for the conference. It's going to be a great time. I'll see everybody in San Diego. No show on Monday. I will be back here with Fade to Black on Tuesday. So until Tuesday, you know what I've got, and that is go back Lee Tappy. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go back, Lee Tappy.